There you go.
Welcome to Virtual Programming with Libraries. So this is something new for everybody, and Will Hahn is our first author for the series in writing that we're going to be hosting here. I'm from Bear Library. I'm one of the adult program coordinators. I'm the only one right now for Bear Library, but I'm representing all libraries through virtual programming because anybody can join us now. So Will Hahn is here. He's from Newark, Delaware, and he's one of our best local authors that we have come into libraries to present for us. And he's been presenting for us for quite a while. And he writes the fantasy series Lands of Hope. And he also teaches at Mount Sophia. And he will be doing today's By the Cover. And then in July, we have a program also, and in August with Will. So welcome, and I'll let you take it away, Will.
Okay, thanks very much, Dorcia, and welcome everybody who's either listening live or picks up the recording of this presentation later. I am Will Hahn. I've been writing epic fantasy stories for about 12 years. In the last 3 years, I've picked up narrating other people's books on audio. I do teach part-time history and writing and other courses at the high school level. And I am the primary support system for 5 cats that live around my house here in Delaware. So welcome again. Today's topic, By the Cover, spelled either with or without the U. My goal today is to try to get you to think perhaps about something that you're not facing yet as an aspiring author. If you're working on a story, if you've had 1 or 2 tales that you have fleshed out and you're thinking they're kind of ready for publication, a lot of the after the writing chores that have to be handled, that's an important part of what I want to focus on today, particularly the aspect of the cover. And as we all know, the famous saying, don't judge a book by its cover, or don't judge a person, or don't judge a situation by its cover. But you know what we do? We do all the time. And that is the harsh reality that you'll have to face, but it's also an opportunity that you can take advantage of. When you start to know what it is that people see in a cover of a book, why they go for that one and not that one, and how you do it too, then that's an opportunity for you to get on board and make good covers, as good as your writing, that help you find your unique voice and discover your tribe, the people who are going to want to buy your second book and your third, and as many as you choose to write. So today I'll be presenting using slides. There's a lot of covers that you don't want to look at. We'll go over those quickly, but you also don't want to be looking at this face for 2 hours. So I'll be presenting slides and sharing my screen. If you have questions during the presentation, you can certainly ask them when we pause a couple of times. And I'll also share my email address at the end, where you can write to me if you're seeing this on stream, or if you think of a question coming up later. So let me get right to the slide part and put up my PowerPoint. Dorcia, and are you guys able to see that? Let me see if I can share the, there we go. Can you see the cover of the presentation? Hopefully so. So, as I said, people do judge books by their cover, and that may seem like a threat, but in fact, it is an opportunity. It is, however, something that requires your focus. It's something you need to think about, and perhaps, I'm guessing, if you're an aspiring author, I'm guessing that it's not something you've thought about very closely yet. Because after all, you thought of yourself as a writer. You took that big step and started to write a story, and that's a full-time job. It took a lot of attention, took a lot of care, and nobody's saying it shouldn't. But let's just be honest. There are other steps in the process. And if you choose to be an independent author, then you're the only one who can make a decision about what to do in each of those steps. Are you going to do it yourself, DIY? Are you going to hire somebody to do it? Just having to face that question itself is a reason why many authors choose to wait and try to pursue a traditional publishing deal, because their perception is that if they get an agent or they get an editor, a publishing house on their side, they'll handle all these chores for them. And that is to some extent true. There is some of that is true. I must say it's becoming less and less true over time. And the marketing part particularly, which we won't talk about today, is something that you're going to have to take care of no matter who or how you go about this chore. But today I want to focus on the cover. How you could grab a hold of a cover that will do you a favor instead of the opposite. And it might not be something that you really want to focus on. You might want to have somebody else do it. You might not feel you can do it well at all. Well, let me say a couple of things there. That could be true, but you still need to be able to recognize what a good cover is made of so that you can make a good decision when you negotiate for rights with your traditional publisher or with someone that you hire. There really are only so many choices as you go down the list. Editing and formatting, cover design, publication, marketing. You're either going to hire someone to do it, or you'll hope that someone who discovers you, like a publisher, will do it for you, or you're going to do it yourself, or, and this is the part I don't want you to do, but it's the part which I'm afraid happens all the time, you could just try to skate by and ignore it. Seriously. There are people who, and I'm going to show you examples, there are people who wrote and labored and crafted their story and put in all the hours that you're putting in. And yet when it came time to think about the cover, they clearly didn't think about it very much. They said, oh, that's good enough. Oh, it'll be fine. And I believe you'll agree, it absolutely was not fine. So what is it that a cover needs to do for your tale? That's what we're going to focus on today. Whether you do it or hope someone else takes it off your hands, how would you even know a good cover if you saw one? Let's think about what happens when a person, let's say you, goes to the bookstore. And by the way, I'm also addressing people who consider themselves good readers, avid readers, and who enjoy aspects of buying, especially genre fiction. When you people go to a bookstore, what happens? What are you confronted with, and how does the cover impact that experience? Right? Here's a picture of a bookstore. Hundreds of titles, a sea of colors and typeface and different sizes and styles, and it's all just coming right at you. How do you as a customer, when you go to the bookstore, make sense of that? Well, there's two things that a good cover has to do, and it roots in that kind of experience, the go to the bookstore experience. A good cover needs to send a signal, a clear message of what kind of book it is. And it also has to look professional. It obviously can't look terrible or be amateur in its quality. And those are very important aspects that I think a lot of indie authors, just because they're a little afraid or a little bit skittish about it, tend to shy away from. Here's a quote that I think is very useful for us. It's from a man named Orhan Pamuk. He said, "Book titles are like people's names. They help us distinguish a book from the million others it resembles. But book covers are like people's faces. Either they remind us of a happiness we once knew, or they promise a blissful world we have yet to explore. That's why we gaze at book covers as passionately as we do at faces." So the cover, which is not just the title, which is not just a piece of artwork. The cover is a collection of several things that we'll talk about and list, but that reaches in and causes the prospective buyer to have a real emotional reaction. They gravitate toward it. They feel good or yearning or excited. It's an emotional reaction when they see your cover. They start getting excited about your book. And for good or for ill, that's important because it's the first part of your story. Now, as I just said, it's not only the artwork on the cover, but let's focus on that for a second. Notice how certain images, certain stock images, can send a strong message of what kind of book it is. I don't think, as we are independent authors, I don't think we like being pigeonholed. We don't like thinking, oh, I'm not just a horror author. It's not just mystery. It's unique. And that's absolutely right. You want your voice to come out. You want to be very specific in terms of the reading experience. They're going to get a unique sense of you and want to buy everything you've written. But starting out, stepping into the bookstore, there is no section for unique genre crossing, never seen before books. There's no title above the rows that says that. There's horror, there's mystery, there's fantasy, and you need to send a signal that you belong in the general area of some of the classic genres that you all know from visiting the bookstore. And look how individual pieces of art can send a signal pretty clearly about those things. Look at the 4 pieces of artwork I put in the bottom left of this slide, just regular kind of very stock images. The lady's face in silhouette, the cameo. That's not a modern spy thriller. That's not a zombie apocalypse horror. That signals some kind of Regency, historical fiction, novel of manners, like a Jane Austen. It signals something from a fairly specific period of time, could be 17 or 1800s, could be early 1900s, right? Focusing on the life of a woman, lots of literary elements in the writing. It's actually a very specific symbol of a certain kind of writing. It doesn't mean you have to be all of those things, and your book won't be all of those things. But that kind of symbol on the front of a book does send a pretty clear message. And that is the kind of cameo that's used on a lot of novel of manners covers these days. What about the sword? The hilt of a sword, right? Clearly a major signal that this book is going to be fantasy, epic or heroic fantasy. And why would the hilt of a sword be so commonly chosen? Well, the second aspect of what we're going to talk about a little later is how to look professional. And all things being equal, one way to make your book look professional is to take a photograph, to use photographic images as opposed to drawings. Of course, it can be well done either way. But the problem with fantasy, if you want a photograph, you're really in trouble. There's no dragons that I know of. There's no, how do you take a picture of a magic spell, right? All the things that you're talking about in a fantasy book are really pretty hard to photograph. And oftentimes the description of the individual character is also not somebody who actually exists, right? Right about the time you start putting a cover on your fantasy book, you regret telling people that a person has gray hair and gray eyes, because there isn't anybody who looks like that. So the sword, a picture of a sword, we have museum quality photographs of swords and also helmets readily available fairly inexpensively. So that's a great way to signal that you're going to be reading a fantasy book. And one great example of that, George R.R. Martin, who's the author of Game of Thrones, the HBO series, 6 or 7 books. He'll have that 7th book written, he promises, at some point. He's a multimillionaire. He can put whatever he wants on the cover of his books. And in at least 2 cases, it was a sword, the hilt of a sword, just like that. So a clear signal of that large area, and then you start to focus down. Look at that beautiful fixer-upper in the lower left there, down by the quaint waterfront. No, this is not some kind of literary fiction book. This is going to be horror, maybe a murder mystery. Obviously, the dark sea, the dark night, the lonely windows in the old house, isolated, remote, danger, danger. Clearly a message that that's the general area. And then the 4th one, I wanted to include an image of something a little more specific, a little more niche oriented. Here's a man climbing stairs away from your point of view, the narrowing perspective as it gets further and further away. You might not recognize that. It depends on what you read or what you enjoy, but that is a pretty clear signal that we're looking at some kind of thriller, some kind of suspense, psychological, really tense, gripping action. Not really breakneck action, but something more psychological. At the top of those stairs, you just know there's a door. And when the man opens that door, he's not going to be happy. It's something really gripping and deep and traumatic. That's the kind of image you get for that sort of little slice of genre fiction. Overall, when you consider the artwork, the title, the author's name, other things that we'll talk about briefly, the cover of your book is a picture. All those things together is a picture. And that picture, as you know, tells 1,000 words. It's the first 1,000 words of your story, and they come way before the ones that you write. We'd love to believe that people buy the book because they know how good your writing is, but that's impossible. They're going to make a decision to grab your book and bring it up to the front because maybe they flip a couple of pages. Maybe they read the blurb on the back. Maybe they read somebody's recommendation that you have there on the dust jacket cover. But basically, because of the cover of the book, that's what's going to take that to the front of the store or the checkout cart online. So let's focus a little more on how books can send a message. Here are 4 books that come from 2 or 3 years ago. I don't expect you to be too familiar with any of them, but think about the different major categories of genre fiction or other types of writing. Here's 7 of them for you. I'm giving you more genres than there are books because I don't want you to proceed by process of elimination, but we'll take about 10 or 15 seconds here. Just jot down left to right which one of those 7 choices that I'm giving you is each of these 4 books. All you have is the cover to work with. Which genre are they each in? Pick 4, eliminate 3. Take a guess. You don't have to get them all right. Some of these are a little bit close. They're kind of cousins in genre fiction. That's okay. All right. Take a shot at all 4. Here's the reveal. Did you get all 4 right? Bravo. If you even got 3, then I think I've made my point. Kristen Hanna on the left, you see a scene from this world, the alleged real world. There's a road going through the forest back toward the mountains. It's not active. It's not tense. It's a very restful sort of sunset kind of light. And the title, The Great Alone, right? What a perfect title for literary fiction, which is going to focus on the lives of individuals, is going to get inside their heads and think about their arc as they grow or experience either loss or rediscovery or great love or something. That's clearly a signal that you're in a literary fiction book. Not in the least bit wild like a fantasy or a sword and sorcery, not horror, not any of those kind of out there genre fiction. Now, poetry books, that's the one I would grant you is really kind of hard, right? Rupi Kaur, Milk and Honey. I don't know the author. I've never looked at this book, but little clues, maybe, little clues. It's a very basic cover. It summons an image that is kind of static, right? Milk and honey. It's not the land of milk and honey. It's not my journey through the land of milk and honey, right? Or not milk and honey for breakfast. It's just an image of milk and honey, no capital letters. That reminded me of E.E. Cummings, even Rupi Kaur's name, no capital letters. And the picture of bumblebees. Poetry is a really hard sell. It's very difficult to market and sell poetry. I don't have any inside tricks about how to do that. But hopefully those tiny clues would lead people to believe that this was a book of poetry and poetry that they'd like to read. Now, David Baldacci is arguably the most famous of these 4. I think most people would associate him with spy thrillers and tense government agents going on secret missions. Again, we got 2 people going away from the point of view. They're walking right through the title, End Game. You can barely even see behind all that there's a cityscape of some kind with the mountains in the distance. So again, a man and a woman moving away from the camera, something tense is going to be happening to them. And those are pretty reliable clues of what kind of book you're looking at. And then maybe another hard one, The Children of Eden. We see a girl's face, 2 versions of a girl's face, either moving through time or suffering some kind of internal conflict. But your big clue is that it's a young adult and that it doesn't look overtly happy or campy in any way. It does look kind of tense and threatening. That's your clue that we're really looking at a dystopian novel here. And I do think you should probably get those kinds of clues. There are, different words for all of these genres, maybe words that you're more used to using. But as a reader, you do pick up on these clues when you go to the bookstore or when you're on Amazon and you see people who bought this book also read, you see a whole banner of titles. Look at those covers. Look at what they're trying to tell you and the message that they are not ashamed to send to you. I'm sure there's a lot more things going on in Children of Eden than a girl having some kind of either internal or external struggle. I'm sure there's a ton of things going on. The book, I'm sure, is quite unique, but it is out of the same shelf, out of the same general area as Maze Runner and The Hunger Games and young adult dystopian novels of that genre. And people want that. They want that message sent to them. One thing I'd like to do on this slide before we move on, take another look at those 4 titles. There is one thing about all 4 of them that is exactly the same. I'm not talking about the color. I'm not talking about whether the title is in white font. Something else about all 4 of these is exactly the same, almost exactly the same. Did you notice? All 4 of these books from all different genres are New York Times bestsellers. Of course, if you can get that praise, if you can win that plaudit or that bonus or that award, of course you put that on the front of your book. And that's another element, right? So let's make a quick list of the kinds of things that will probably be involved in the book cover of your tale when you're done writing it, or the tales that you look for when you go to the store. There's going to be some kind of artwork. Even if it's just a black cover, that's going to be artwork. The author's name, you got to put it somewhere. The title, including a subtitle or a series title, that's got to be included and found. You got to find a place for that. Artwork, author's name, title. Then praise and plaudits like New York Times bestseller, or like the Associated Press, right there in the middle of the David Baldacci, you can see, right? Baldacci is a gifted storyteller, Associated Press. If you've got some kind of blurb or logline quote like that, that's praise and plaudits. And then one more thing I'll talk about a little later on when I can show you some better examples, other kinds of branding elements that have to do with certain symbols or the type of font you choose, the placement and the spacing of certain items, and perhaps even the background color and things of that nature. Whether or not to make those things rigorously consistent or whether to vary them, those are all considerations that go into creating a good title, a good cover. All right, so things to keep in mind. I'll give you a moment a little later on to jot down some notes about what you think might go on your cover. Be thinking about those elements as I present some more to you. Now, like I said, some of you may be so intimidated already that you're thinking, like all of these 4 authors, you know what, I'll just wait and get published traditionally, which is absolutely fine. That is absolutely a choice you can make. When you make that choice, to the extent that you do make that choice, you better understand that things are going out of your hands. When you turn it over, cover or editing, like anything else, when you turn it over to a publisher, the publisher is going to have their own ideas about what works and about what's right. And they may not be at all your ideas. So get set for a little tension or maybe even some disappointment. Here's a fantastic example of what I'm talking about. These are all traditionally published books from about 4 years ago and further that all happen to have the subject of Africa in some way. These are all books, 36 of them, about Africa, and they were all traditionally published. Just look at that palette. Just let that wash over your eyes. Everything's orange or red or yellow. The sun is always setting. There's a banyan tree or some exotic animal. On almost 3/4 of these covers, there's 2 or 3 elements that are exactly the same. We're talking about Out of Africa and King Solomon's Mine. I mean, the books that are so different. They're ripping adventure stories. They're heart-wrenching literary fiction stories. They're mysteries. There are 57 nations on the continent of Africa and 900 million people. But especially for the English-speaking audience, traditional publishers are not interested in the finer points of your book, how unique it is, what kind of special voice that you speak of. They know, like a big rubber stamp, this is Africa. This says what Africa is. And yes, it's stereotypical. And yes, it's almost insulting, but that works. They know that people seeing something kind of orangey red with an elephant and a banyan tree means Africa. And people who are interested in books about Africa will go to it. Now, there isn't an Africa section in the bookstore, but as you walk down the mystery section or the literary fiction section, when you see the orange burnished sunset and the wide-spreading banyan tree, you think, oh, a mystery about Africa or a literary fiction story about Africa. Cool. You know what it's telling you. It comes right inside you, that emotional quality. And it's something based on trust. What traditional publishers tell you they know, is that they can get the reader to trust them. And this is particularly true when you have made it, when you're a best-selling author. That, of course, has a huge impact on the way your cover is designed. Look at these two by major best-selling authors. Mary Higgins Clark, Danielle Steele. I've never read a single one of their pages, but I know those names. They're both huge best-selling authors. And look at what's the same about those two covers. Very different artwork, very different styles, but what can you see that's exactly the same, really, about both of them? That the author's name is on top and the largest font by far. It's the most visible, completely easily able to see item on the entire cover. In fact, the Danielle Steele, the color of the font is the same as the color of that creamy color of the clouds behind it, and yet you can see it standing out perfectly because of the edging and the sort of 3D effect they gave. You don't have an instant's hesitation in recognizing Danielle Steele. Huge, right? Mary Higgins Clark, they use bright yellow, right? Just to make sure that you can tell whose book it is. In fact, it's almost difficult with the Mary Higgins Clark book to see what the artwork is behind that author's name. It's a person swimming in a pool, you know? I love it. A novel. You see that? Can you just barely make it out? A novel. I've got my eyes on you. A novel. It's almost like they threw the elements up in the air and just let them land where they would, because it doesn't matter. These are best-selling authors, and everybody just wants to see that it's them. So, you know, my advice to you, if you can be a best-selling author, definitely go do that. Definitely go do that. You won't have much control over how the cover looks. The publisher will take that over and they'll send you back a cover, and you may love it. I love the Danielle Steele cover. You may hate it. I really don't like the Mary Higgins Clark cover, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're going to give it fantastic coverage. They're going to put it on the end cap in the bookstore, and what people are going to see from 25 feet away is your name on top, bigger than anything else, and that's their tribe. They know. They've read the first 12 books, and here comes number 13. That's all they have to know. The title doesn't matter. The artwork doesn't really matter. It's just the next Danielle Steele. Ooh, good. And they grab it. That's the way it works in traditional publishing. That's the kind of message that gets sent. That's just how blunt and unsubtle as the thrust of the cover is, but it's brutally, brutally effective. By the way, that's not true everywhere. Here's a bookshelf in a city in China. A colleague of mine named Tara Sparling, she's from Ireland. She took a magnificent trip all the way across Russia by train and then down into China. And she noticed that in the bookstores in China, this is all you get. The spine has the title and the author's name in Chinese characters on it, and that's it. The front of the book and the back of the book is blank. It's just the same color, the white, the salmon color, the pink. There's no imagery at all. They don't do covers in China. They just give you the spine, down the spine. That's all. That's the only way you find out the information, which I thought was just extraordinary, because again, the English speaking audience definitely uses covers. And if you needed more proof that stuff in the same genre will always look the same, look at this fantastic end cap where some enterprising bookstore employee decided to rename the steamy romance section, Dude, Where's My Shirt? Right? Because every one of these best-selling novels in this, you know the genre, it's steamy romance. Not quite erotica, but certainly not, you know, historical, literary, novel of manners romance. No, no, no. There's going to be some bodice ripping going on here. And evidently, there was never a guy involved in any of these romances who could ever lay his hands on something to wear above the waist. All of them have a guy stripped above the waist. It is absolutely that crude and that effective. If you're going to design the cover yourself, it doesn't mean you have to slavishly imitate these covers, but that's what you're up against. That's what you have to deal with, because that's the signal the rest of the world is getting with the volume turned all the way up. And once again, you don't have to draw every possible reader there is. You need to find your tribe, and your tribe is responding to signals like that, emotional signals, not really subtle signals. not really tiny detail signals, but ones that they can see from a mile away. If you're a bestseller, fantastic. You just put your name up there. Other authors maybe need to do some other things to get their covers in good shape. So I've talked about one of the two things, how to send a signal with your cover, the good, the bad, the ugly of that. Take a moment now, if you would, because I think you need to take a minute to maybe assemble your thoughts with regards to the story that you are working on now, if there's a manuscript you're working on now, or maybe you're just finishing it up. Be brutal, right? Yes, it's a bunch of other genres too, but name the one genre. Name it. Is it horror? Is it fantasy? And then in parentheses put, yeah, but flavor of this. Sure. But make sure you name that genre. And then try to think about, here are the other elements of a good cover. What are the kinds of things that should maybe appear on yours? Can you think of right now an image that would make sense? Not just in terms of your story, but in terms of all the stories from that genre that people will be looking at. What kind of colors go well? Where should your name and the title be? Should you always have to be on the bottom just because you're not so well known? I don't know, but something that you want to do purposefully. What should be the largest print on the front? Should it be the title? Should it be your name? Should it be something else? Once again, I'll try to talk about branding elements a little bit later, but there will be kinds of things that you can do thinking in terms of writing more than one book, a series or other books set in the same area, or just something that's characteristic to you. Like drawing on TV, the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Remember at the end, you all know what I'm talking about. If you ever saw the show, the little kitten goes meow, right? Instead of MGM with a lion, it was MTM with a little kitten, right? That was so classic and so stamped on her character. It was very much the character of Mary Tyler Moore who was doing the show of her own name. So if there are things like that that sort of say you, and they can be little things too, take a minute to jot down those ideas. And if you do have any questions in the live audience, you can write those up in the chat room, and Dorcia will let me know. If you want to wait until later, we can do it later. I'll have my email at the end, as I said. But take a minute now and take some notes on sending a message with your cover. I took advantage of that time to have a little water and to take a deep breath as we plunge into the second half of the presentation. If you've got time, if you want to do some more note taking, come back later and let me know. I'll answer questions, as I said, at any time later in this presentation or afterwards. So let's start to move into the second half. I talked about sending a message where you had to kind of bite the bullet and realize that the cover needs to focus. It needs to perhaps shed some dear things that you like. You're just having some of your first thoughts about it. Be flexible, look at other covers, admit what your genre is, look for your tribe. That's the sort of what of it. In the second half, when we go to the second thing the cover must do, I think we'll have some fun. We're focused a little more on the how of it, to have a professional look, that your book needs to look professional. Now brace yourselves, okay? I am not exaggerating in the slightest with anything I show you from this point on. There is no hyperbole or opinion involved. I'm going to show you covers that actually exist, that are still out there now. I'm not here to pick on anybody. Wait until you see the examples. I'll use some of my own work too. I'm up for some examination here. You can put me on the rack along with these others. But I think you will agree that these covers that I'm about to show you, most of them do very little to help the readers find what they're looking for. And there are really good reasons why they're bad. And those are the kind of things that you can use as signposts to help you avoid making those mistakes in the future. So let's see if we can suss some of them out. Like I said, I've checked recently just before this presentation because I updated with some different covers. And all but one of these covers that I'm about to show you are still up there on Amazon today. You can go and look. In fact, some of these books have been revised, and what they changed did not include the cover. And that's another issue that I want to talk about. The fact that you can, you're never all done. You never strike out in the cover making game. So a lot of these books are still on Amazon, and the sales rank are pretty much what you'd expect. Here's The Blood Between Us by Jared Begora. Now, the two criteria: sends a message, professional look. Does this send a message? I think actually it does. The artwork is not that great, right? Why isn't this photographic? Why isn't it a little better defined? I know it's dark. I know they're all apparently goths. Okay, but three kids in a story together, three young adults in a story together. I think it's pretty clearly signaling either horror or some kind of paranormal, like a Twilight, where there's going to be vampires and werewolves, and these kids in high school have to deal with that. The blood between us, right? That's quite possible. But then look at the subtitle, if you can. Did you notice that there is one way down there? A twisted teen comedy. Comedy? Wait a minute. Now you look at it again and you think, well, are some of these three kids related or something? Is it like family squabbles, the blood between us, like brothers, sisters, or some kind of non-nuclear? Now I'm really confused. This is supposed to be funny? Is that really sending a message of funny to anybody? I can't see it. I can't see it at all. So yes, I think the artwork is a little substandard, but they're also the author is crossing himself up by sending deliberately, almost seems like deliberately mixed signals, maybe trying to say too much at once, right? And that is a classic mistake that a cover can make. Okay, so that's not so great. But really, can it hold a candle to Bobby Massey and Team Bazaar? Bobby Massey and Team Bazaar. This is one of my all-time favorite book covers because it tells you so much in one go, right? Look at the kind of failed perspective, right? I mean, the image I got was Phantom Tollbooth, right? A place where time and space don't really matter. That guy in blue with the hands stretching up into the center of the book, is that really some attempt at perspective, or is he like Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four? I don't know. The gray and purple Corona skull, the enormous sun with what looks like a moon in between it and the people, the car careening out of control, all of these different elements. Yeah, they're poorly drawn, but what is it even intended to convey? Is it a Phantom Tollbooth kind of story? I'm not sure. And by the way, what's the author's name? I know he's not a bestseller, right? But it's not Bobby Massey. The author's name is Tyson Clark, and he put his own name under the wheels of the car. It's like he ran over his own name. He's trying to hide his name. That's never going to work. That can't be good. So we have a book that I think completely fails to send the message. The execution of it is clearly not that good. But he's also not doing himself any favors. If you make me this uncertain about what the book is, what kind of genre it is, then I come to look at a word like bazaar, and I have to wonder, does this author even know how to spell? There are two ways to spell the word bizarre. One is meaning strange, and the other is meaning carnival, and neither one is spelled that way. So is it a brand new word, or does he just not know how to spell? You can't make a reader this uncertain and expect them to buy the book. You just can't. And yes, it's a question of the professional look. It's just not a professional look, but it's still up there, and it's sending a really weird message. Now, sometimes the look is professional and yet doesn't really go together. The next example I'm going to give you is from something that we would call high concept. If you're familiar with the phrase high concept, the movie Snakes on a Plane is high concept. You may have seen the movie. I haven't. I don't need to see the movie. I know what it's all about, right? Snakes on a plane. That tells you everything you need to know, right? Snakes break loose on an airline and everybody, goes nuts, obviously. So high concept is an area where with just a few words, you suggest what the whole thing is about. And the next example is definitely high concept. I introduce to you Nazi dinosaur high school chaos, right? Which obviously tells you that we're in a wild and wacky world where, of course, there are Nazi dinosaurs in high school, which I think would pretty obviously lead to chaos. So this could be a really fun book, a crazy ride. Are the Nazis dinosaurs? Is the high school got kids in it, or does it have dinosaurs in it? It turns out that they are dinosaurs who go to high school, and the high school is being run by Nazis who are also presumably dinosaurs. Okay, so we're going to have a lot of fun with a book like this. But take a look at the cover. Each element of the cover is pretty well done. The dinosaur is nice detail. The high school is nice detail. The volcano in the back is nice detail. But they don't seem to go together. This is what we call clip art. It doesn't look like it all came from the same place. It looks very much like somebody got a high quality image of a dinosaur and pasted it in the front of a pretty high quality image of a high school. And then the volcano behind it, same business. And the moon behind that, same business. It really doesn't give you that, it doesn't click into place as a single piece of art. And we're also looking at a very common problem with a lot of book covers, readability. The title of the book is Blood Red. The magma coming out of the volcano is pretty bloody red. It's pretty close. And so, yes, you can read it, but remember the Danielle Steele, that really popped. Even though it was exactly the same shade, it really popped, and you could make out Danielle Steele very easily. So something with the style of the font would have really helped here, if not a different color. And again, does it grab you? This is one of the ones I think that is not as terribly bad if you're kind of into that kind of wacky, alternate world comic fiction. This might grab you. The concept might grab you, but the cover doesn't really do as much, I think, to pull you in. It kind of puts you off the longer you look at it, I think. And finally, from this page, I want to use one more example. It's coming. It's okay. Cosmic Consciousness and Healing with the Quantum Field. No, it's not going to get any more sharp. It's not going to fade in anymore. That's it. That's as much resolution as you're going to get. Can you even read it without my help? Darshan Baba, you can see his name, and he has this beautiful piece of artwork, right? He clearly fell in love with this gorgeous golden sunset. And it is spectacular, right? And he went so far in that direction that he never wanted to interfere with it. Can you see that there is a subtitle there beneath Cosmic Consciousness and Healing with the Quantum Field? There is. It's a 3-line, 15-word subtitle. And nobody is gonna squint and lean in close enough to read that. You do get the message of what the book is about, right? This is nonfiction. This is somebody advising people. It's in the sort of self-help category, a way that they can improve their lives, self-improvement. Okay, great. And the image is really, the artwork is fabulous, but it overwhelms the entire cover. That light purple with the shadowy font effect really assassinated your ability to read this clearly. And there's just not a good reason not to make your title really, really clear. What good does that subtitle do anybody if they can't even read it? They can't focus enough to read it. So sure, these are bad covers. But the thing to keep in mind here, as you start to look at promoting yourself as an author, I want to try and convince you that for good or for ill, this cover is going to be a major asset and tool to you, which is to say, it's going to come up again and again. When you think about how to promote yourself, there are really 2 pieces of collateral that you can use. If you're going to a fair or a book fair or a Comic-Con, or going to give a library talk like this one, If you're going to score an interview in a magazine or on a radio show or a podcast, there's probably two pieces of collateral that matter more than anything else. A good headshot, a nice professionally taken looking headshot, make you look nice, smile for the camera, come on. And then the cover of your book. So if it's bad, it's going to be bad 1,000 times. Every time you present yourself to people, if you've written 6 books, if you've written 10, but you keep a cover that looks like one of these 4, it's going to be a millstone around your neck. It's going to make people say, what? Why would I want any book by this guy or gal? There's no time you should be comfortable with having a bad cover. And it's like a crime that's going to dog you for the rest of your life until you fix it, which, by the way, you can do. We'll talk about that. Let's continue. You could be famous, for your cover in a way you hate. Look at this. Billionaire werewolf ate my fiance. Okay, so we're clearly headed into a kind of comic direction here. I became aware of this cover when a fellow author posted the picture and said, I felt so bad about my writing today. I felt so down in the dumps about my writing and how it's not going anywhere that I went to my favorite website, changelingpress.com, to look at the covers. They always make me feel better. So she picked herself up. She gave herself a pick-me-up by going to this website where apparently the covers can be reliably kind of comic. And this one is certainly trying to be comic in a way with a title like Billionaire Werewolf Ate My Fiance. But notice some things about this cover. First of all, the title is not particularly clear or easy to read. It's in this kind of orange and white pasta with sauce. I think of it as the color of digested fiance. I really think that's what they were aiming for, was to put it in the same color as if the eating had already happened. Well, okay, but you can't see it very well. That's the bottom line. And when you see, can you notice here the two people? There's the girl and the guy, and they've done this artsy thing where their noses and their eyes and their lips kind of blend together to make a single face. Right, fantastic. That's terrific. It's actually quite good artwork. The drawing's quite good in and of as far as it goes. But please, when do people ever stand like this? When does this ever happen that somebody stands to one side of you about 4 inches away from your face? I can think of 2 possibilities. Either this is the billionaire werewolf and is about to eat you, right? He's that close because he's about to eat you. Or it's because you've asked him whether there's some wax in your ear and he's trying to help you out by looking for it. And that's not really, neither of those are really winning circumstances in my view. So this one doesn't really work as a cover. And speaking of covers that don't work, the way you could be famous and not want to be, there is actually an entire website, and I'm about to show you some winners, quote unquote, from the website lousybookcovers.com. It is a website called lousybookcovers.com. This is the site you do not want to be featured on. And they have winners every single week. They have plenty to work with. I went back and checked on it again when I refreshed my slides here, and they've actually expanded. They've gotten lots of different aspects to this website, including a place on the site where they will offer to look at your cover and help you out with it, to help give you some advice about how to improve it, which is a great idea. And they've done a lot of thinking about what makes a good and a bad cover. So let's take a look at some of the covers that they had as winners in the past and see what it is about them, okay? Here's the first one, Drover's Luck by Robert Peterson. So my question here, what exactly is this tale about? Is it a young person's tale, a kind of children's book, a fairy tale? I suppose. But the word drover, that's kind of an SAT word. That's like from the Oregon Trail, the driver of a wagon. Why do we need to use a word like that in a children's book? Is that a boy or a girl? And all the artwork is, again, clip art, right? There isn't a single element in this field that was actually in the field. The field looks photographic, but the sheep, the chicken, the Brahma bull in the back. Those are all clip art pasted in, including the kid. And purple dog. Why would there be a purple dog on the cover? Even if there is one in the story, what are you getting out of putting a purple dog on the cover? There's just so many questions about this book. I can't imagine it really drawing anybody in, a kid or their parents, because I have no idea that message, the message being sent, is completely ambiguous to me. I always find this very puzzling. That's the one book that you don't see on Amazon anymore. It has been actually withdrawn. It hasn't been given a new cover or anything. And I have to feel that was the right decision. So I can't find out any more about the story. Here's Fierce Storm, The Guarded Heart, the Ladies Series, Book 2 by Paulette Jones. Well, that strikes me as a lot of titling there, right? Fierce Storm is probably the title. It's big, it's on top. But then The Guarded Heart can't be the series. The series is the Ladies Series, Book 2. So what is The Guarded Heart? Is the title 5 words or is it 2? I thought for a minute that perhaps Fierce Storm was the name of the main character and that she's in a series, she's like a detective or somebody who's looking for love or something like that. No, there is a group of women in this series and they all have storm-like names, but Fierce Storm is meant to be the name of the book. Notice that there are 3 women in the picture. Can you see that third one sitting down? They're all at various stages of faded, deliberately faded. And yet they're all the same woman. So is the author trying to tell us about different moods over time or something? I don't know. And by the way, those are not cracks. This is not an old used cover. Those are meant to be lightning bolts on the cover. And I think you'll agree with me that really doesn't work. They're way too thin if they're anywhere near the women and the door in this picture. So there's just a ton of confusion, again, about this cover. And it looks like they had photographic quality available to them, but deliberately turned aside from it to make some of the women more faded and to impose these ultra thin lightning bolts on the cover. Really just kind of a swing and a miss in terms of whatever genre they're going for. This is actually from the genre that you might think of as inspirational, semi-biographical stories. A lot of authors who write about their own journey, maybe they just lightly fictionalize it and they're looking to tell people about either their romantic or their spiritual journey. And that's fine. That's a legit genre, but it's really kind of hard to get that message from this cover. Now I'll tell you the title of the next book before I show it to you. The title of the next book is it's The Esoteric Order of Dagon. The Esoteric Order of Dagon, right? And the other material around the book will clue you in that it's meant to be a collection of short stories written in the style of H.P. Lovecraft, the great horror writer of the early 20th century. So this is going to be, that's a clear message when you say it's in the style of H.P. Lovecraft, because he wrote about ancient forgotten civilizations, semi-human creatures, blasphemous rituals, and horrifying gods, elder gods the size of planets who could just eat Earth entire, but they're sleeping now and soon they will awaken, right? This mind-blasting horror, very, very esoteric, very, very intellectual, all right? So he's going to want an image on his cover of something that suggests this ancient civilization thing, right? That it's time forgot and an ancient civilization. All right. So just think in the first second as you see this cover, does this send that message? Ready? Here it comes. Temple? Secret temple? Human sect? No, actually, it's like the inside lintel of a library building somewhere, right? But I think the author, I'm just guessing, I think he took his camera and tried to focus down on just that part of the plinth that would look maybe a little ancient or hard to define or older. And then he put that up there as the cover art. It really doesn't fool you for even a second, right? It's the entrance to some municipal or university building. And I think maybe he got a university press to publish this book because when you look at the rest of the cover, this L-shaped green band, this sort of olive green band with his title and the subtitles kind of crammed in wherever they can fit, that looks an awful lot like a textbook to me, right? A philosophy of religion textbook or differential calculus or something. Not surprisingly, this book has 5 reviews, all of which are 5 stars, and 3 of which are named 5 stars. That's the name of the review, is 5 stars, and there's almost nothing else written. So, I mean, I don't mean to trample on somebody's dreams here. The idea, the message sent by the subtitle is very clear, very clear. I get it, I understand it, I'd even like it. But so many other elements of this title really fail. They just don't execute something that gives me, this is one where you probably should have hired an artist to do some drawing and not have to go into a photograph all the time, because you're not going to get a photograph of an ancient civilization or a planet-sized deity who's sleeping. That's not going to happen. You got to get something drawn and drawn better than this. And finally, here comes the 4th book, which I defy you to even read. The title of the book is not Jaslyn Breeze. That's the author. So Jaslyn Breeze is doing sort of bestseller thing, putting their name up there, biggest font at the top. The book is called Details of Deception, if you can just sort of make that out. And why are we having such a hard time? This is a splendid example of somebody who thought they had a good idea, but really wound up with a title that's very, very hard to read, right? It's all about the money, right? It's about double crossing and money and bank robberies, something like that, right? But they said, well, you know, the money's green and white. Let's have a title and an author's name that's green and white. And yes, it matches, but you can't read it. And if you think this is bad, think about trying to find this online when it's a thumbnail, right? Trying to find that in a catalog. I defy you to read that clearly. So as you can see, it's not too hard to go pretty far off course. And I think all of these titles, these covers that I've shown you, have elements to them that are really problematic. And yet their authors went ahead and published. Maybe because they had some of the same feelings you did, that they can't handle it or it'll be good enough. I had those feelings myself, as I'll show you in just a little while. Here's another one. I want you to take a minute here again while I take another drink of water. Take a look at Can You Turn It Off by Derek Caliber. And I'm telling you off the bat, it's not a badly drawn cover, but tell me some things that, think about some things that might be standing out to you now based on what you've seen so far. Are there some things that are a little bit off about this cover? Just make some notes to yourself. And then I'll tell you my ideas. So here's Derek Caliber, Can You Turn It Off? A Diary of Psychic Awakening. All right. My first thought was that the title is really not doing him any favors. It's kind of tucked in underneath the author's name, almost sandwiched between it and the subtitle in a way that you sort of lose it. The color is not particularly brilliant or outstanding. And Can You Turn It Off? I mean, in a way that sounds like, you know, the neighbor yelling over the fence, hey, you kids, can you turn the music down? You know, it's after 10. That's not the direction that you want to take this story in, but it's too late if you have to get down to a diary of psychic awakening to go, oh, okay. You know, you need to know better and earlier than that if you're going to name your book, Can You Turn It Off? What kind of thing we're talking about turning off. Secondly, and I think most seriously, we are looking at a lot of different genres here. This guy did not send the message. And even the subtitle does not make that clear. There's genre confusion all over this cover. We got the guy's face, well drawn, beautifully blending into a wolf's head on the other side. Again, well drawn. And you got a nice blending going on there, right? That's really well done. But does this mean that he can communicate with wolves telepathically? Or that he can turn into a wolf? He's a shape changer? I don't know. I don't get it. And when you look at the background, this gorgeous nighttime sky, but it is still sunset. You can see the sun there. So that means this bright blue ball in the upper right side that's not the moon. That's not the sun. We see the sun. They are not on Earth. If this is the night sky, they're not on Earth. But if they're not on Earth, why is he wearing a Walmart shirt? Look at that store-bought plain old shirt that the guy is wearing. So that's all very confusing to me. It's just not sending a clear, consistent message. Am I being too picky? I'm telling you, that's not going to sell. They see much less ambiguous covers right down the row. And of course, my favorite, and I hope you saw it too, what on earth, or maybe we're not on Earth, but what in the world is a tree frog doing here? Again, is it important to the story? Probably. But you can't tell us that part of the story on this cover. It doesn't matter if that tree frog is this fella's fiance. It doesn't matter. You can't get into that here. That's not going to work to send the right message. You've got to save things like that. And I guess it also looks like it's definitely clip art, just pasted on the front, almost like an afterthought anyway. So lousybookcovers.com, these are all winners from that website, has a list of tags for what's wrong with each cover. So they've sort of classified the kind of problems that they're seeing. And you can look at those tags and agree or disagree. And you can also go to that site and search on those tags to see a whole bunch of covers that seem to display that kind of problem. That's a real resource. You could take a look at that and really have some good thoughts, I think, about how to correct certain problems, especially if you've mocked up a cover already and are looking to get some feedback. Here's a list of the things that they have identified as tag problems. Bad font choice, meaning the style or color of the font. Cut and paste, like this tree frog here. Mismatched art styles, a little bit of that we're seeing here on this cover as well. Actual title, please. Like when you put the title in an ambiguous place or don't make it sufficiently clear, they'll say actual title, please. Font overload. You've had 3, 4, 5 different fonts on the same cover. Aspect ratio, that's something I'll talk about in a little while. Busy, 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 that's another tag they use. Busy, 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 there's just too much involved in this cover. Filterific, filterific, I'm not sure exactly what that refers to. And then WTF, which I think is a catch-all category, but you can go and explore that if you like. You can search on WTF. And there's also a Captain Obvious tag called Bringing Sexy Back, which I think should be fairly clear to you. When was sex ever gone? But yes, there are covers that definitely push that throttle a little too hard. So it's not difficult to find covers like this that are in some senses failing and not doing their authors a favor. You want to avoid those. But it's a long road between obviously bad and obviously good. Remember, those covers from the bestsellers that I showed you, they're not really good covers. If you tried to imitate those covers, you would not succeed. They succeed because of the author's name, and we don't have that yet. Our tribe has not found us yet. And in between those two ends, it's a long road with lots of turns. And I'd like to show you some work by authors that I happen to know personally who gave me their permission to look at their covers. And there's a bit of a mix between really good ideas, not so good ideas, and ideas that are actually still up in the air. We're not really sure if they work well or not. It's possible to tell the truth and still lose, to still have a cover that doesn't actually get there. Remember, the things we want to focus on are whether it gives a clear message about what genre it's in, as well as whether it's executed well. The first cover is from a good friend of mine, cousin of my lovely wife. His name is Patrick Rockefeller, and he writes horror. Here's the cover to What You Wish For. Patrick Rockefeller writes a nice kind of suspenseful, intellectual horror. It's not terribly gory, although people do sometimes, get theirs. I was told to be more interesting with my covers. And so this is what he came back with after he'd written a couple of short stories. And I think you'll agree, that's a remarkably effective piece of artwork for a horror story, right? Holy cow. I can almost feel the heat growing on my fingertips as I think about a hand covered with melted wax and then the candles burning down. What You Wish For, right? Which is a nice evocative title. Be careful what you wish for. Couple of things about this cover, though. It is definitely very eye-catching. I think the color and style of the font did not do him any favors. It's a little bit harder to read because the letters are hollow. I think if he'd filled them in, that might have been better. Also, when I talked about aspect ratio just a minute ago, this square is not rectangular enough to pass muster with some ebook publishers. You'll have a little difficulty getting this past the Amazon book people. They have certain prescribed aspect ratio, the length to the width. It has to look like a paperback, bottom line. The length of the width has to fit within a certain aspect ratio. And this one's a little too square. So you've got to be able to work with the art. I think he did it on his own. He did a good job, but not quite in terms of aspect ratio. Here's a book that's in the proper aspect ratio. Ruby Frost by Liz DeJesus. Liz is a local author who gives library talks as well. And when we talk about the marketing side of being an author, she's got great presentations about that. And hopefully you'll get a chance to hear her do that sometime soon. Liz has written a series of books that are magical, genre-bending adventures. They sort of bridge the gap between an urban fantasy and a classic fairy tale. And Ruby Frost is the fourth in the series. Now, I leave it to you to decide whether that title is clearly enough visible. She took a little bit of a risk, kind of like that Danielle Steele with her name at the top. But I do think you can see it well. The aspect ratio is correct. That looks like a paperback. And it is a beautiful, beautiful photograph, yes? So I think you get a clear image. The title is, again, evocative. All the different titles in the series have the word Frost in them. And you get a clear sense that they are relating in some way to one of the classic fairy tales. And she says, I've gotten a lot of nice feedback from people. They say they were drawn to this cover. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Another local author, Lee S. King, she, with her novel Sword's Edge, engaged the services of a local artist, Christy Schaffer, who is they're both down in the Dover area in the middle of the state. And Sword's Edge is a kind of fantasy, young heroine fantasy, classic heroic fantasy with a bit of a tinge of sci-fi. And she has often commented that people walk right up to her table. That cover really pulls them in. The white background, the nice action pose. It's really quite a beautiful cover. Not overly complicated. Nice font choice. I mean, everything about it really is, I think, a splendid cover. That's a local artist working for a local author. And you can have those kind of deals. You can look for people in your area who might be able to help you out. Other authors have talked about the way they were able to write or the kind of advice they got. One said, I was fortunate enough to go to an art school. I met a bunch of reputable artists. So even the person who went to art school didn't feel like they could do their own covers. And they networked with other people to find them. There are websites where you can go and say, I'm writing this kind of a story. I need a cover that will have these elements on it. Once you have a good idea of what you want. And people will bid. They'll bid. They'll tell you, I can do that for X number of dollars. And it can be very successful that way. You look at their artwork, you look at their work and their portfolio, and you make a decision. Somebody told me, I write this kind of fantasy, and people say it has to have something pretentious on the front. What does that mean exactly? What kind of advice is that to have something pretentious on the front? Another author, Sune LaRue, from down in South Africa, has she's written Beginner's Luck, the Mythical Menagerie series, part 1. She says, I write this kind of fiction, and I don't have a kick-ass girl or a brooding male on the cover. So you see the cover there, Big Ben with the rainbow near sunset. She doesn't have a kick-ass girl or a brooding male on the cover. What kind of fantasy is that? To have those kind of young people on the cover? That would be YA. That would be young adult fantasy or urban fantasy, right? She went away from that advice and she showed this specific image. I asked her, is it important that there is a rainbow at some point in the story? And she says, not only is the rainbow important, she says the fact that the rainbow is happening over Big Ben is specifically important. And yet the sales have not been as good as she was hoping. She's going to stick with her guns. The next book in the series takes place near Notre Dame, and she's going to have Notre Dame on the cover. So you can buck that advice. You can go with your gut. You're going to get advice from other people. You need to take it all in and think about what you want. Here's Tears of the Unicorn from Divey Ross. She writes, as it turns out, heroic fantasy. And her title is Tears of the Unicorn. And her cover designer told her, yeah, you don't want to have a unicorn on the cover because heroic fantasy is going to draw male readers. So you want to have something else. And instead, he drew her this nice cover, a little hard to see what's happening. It's men fighting, lots of spears. There's a couple of them on horseback in the back. But he specifically, this cover artist, discouraged her from thinking about a unicorn on the cover, because he said that's what's going to draw female readers. And she says, I'm inclined to disagree with him now. She thinks that maybe that was not the right choice to make. So it's not a bad cover. It's well executed. The ratio, the proportions, all of that's good. A little hard to see up against that dark fighting background, but certainly a reputable cover, one that could get your attention and send the right message that you're not looking at a modern day murder mystery. You're looking at a fantasy book. Now, I promised that you would get to rake my stuff over the coals as well. And the point I want to make, we just looked at some authors who have had mixed success with their covers, some good, some not so good. And the door that's open for them is to try again. It's not over when you put a cover out there. If you find that it's not working well, that people aren't responding to it, that they're getting confused, you can send your book itself on an adventure as you think about going into other covers. You can revise the covers. Think of it, again, we think about the writing, that we're writers and that what we do is write the words. Well, if you put your book out there and then somebody gave you feedback that you had made these horrifying spelling errors all throughout, those kind of synonym errors like there and stuff like that, I'm sure you'd be horrified. Well, you can go and revise that. You can go and take all that out and correct it. You could then pull it back and send it to an editor and pay them to really clean it up and then republish it, right? You can do the same thing with your cover. When I first started out in my chronicling career, I was rejected on the big novel. I wrote the big, great American novel in epic fantasy, and I went after traditional publishing for it. I got thoroughly rejected. So I stormed off in a huff and I thought about how to regroup. This was way back, 2009, 2010. I came back with an idea to write a long story as a series of novellas, to kind of divvy it up into separate parts and to go independent and to e-publish them just as ebooks. This was the first 2 years of the Kindle going on in Amazon back then. And we were all sure that as we talked online, that traditional publication was doomed, paper was dead. I didn't have to worry about any of that kind of publication. So when I was ready to fire away with my series' first book called The Ring and the Flag, I stuck with my motto and said, you know what, this hobby is not going to cost my family any money. That was my initial motto. So I bartered with a colleague who was an artist, and she took my ideas and did her best job at rendering them into a cover. And here it is. There's no need for you to be nice. You've been looking at a lot of covers and being very patient with me. You know there's all kinds of stuff wrong with that cover. The aspect ratio is wrong. It's too square, right? It's not really a paperback size. The font, it does evoke that kind of Lord of the Rings fantasy style, but the G's are terrible. The ring and the rings and the flags. I stuffed my author name down into a forest at the bottom of the page, almost like I'm trying to hide it. And the overall image that you see there, it's a map, but it's kind of foggy. It's actually sort of smoky. You see the edges of the map are singed. When I talk about telling the truth, there is a specific moment in the story, The Ring and the Flag, where the main character, Justin, is so worried that if he fails in his mission, there'll be civil war, that he sees in his mind's eye the map of this area bursting into flames. It's a specific thing that happens in the story. And I said, that's fantastic. I've got a map. I can have that exact image put into, I asked her to make it smokier and dimmer and harder to see so that it would be true to the moment in the story. Terrible, terrible, awful choice, horrendous idea. Don't worry, there's a happy ending to the tale. So I later got signed to a micro publishing contract by a lady who runs a place called the Independent Bookworm. As soon as the ink was dry on that one-page contract, she told me that what she wanted to do was bring my stories into paper publication. And I said, crazy publishing lady, say what? Because paper was supposed to be dead, but she was absolutely adamant. Readers still like paper. They always will. She's, of course, completely correct about that. So you've got to think in terms of publishing as a paperback and also as an audio book, by the way. You've got to think about all formats for your tale when you publish. So this meant that my cherished first cover is going to have to go. She used her own skills. She'd been doing some studying about market and cover design. And she came out with the cover you see here in 2014. Much better, right? The aspect ratio is fixed. The title and the subtitle is crystal clear. My name is there, not on the top, but still pretty big. And notice that she's introduced some branding elements to the cover. That circle with the cross in it is the holy symbol that gets used by the good guys in my land. And you can see Tales of the Lands of Hope around the outside. I am the chronicler of the lands of hope. Those things are clearly mentioned. The subtitle is, the series title, I should say, is Shards of Light 1, right? The ring and the flag. Good proportions, great contrast, right? It is another moment in the tale. I don't want to spoil it yet, but that is taken from another moment of something that actually happens in the tale. And it sends the message because you can see that it's some kind of fantastical creature, and that's a hallmark of fantasy tales. You can't get a photograph, but you can get a competent, easy drawing with good contrast there. And the hope symbol, like I said, my title as Chronicler of the Lands of Hope. And then over to the bottom left, you can see the Independent Bookworm there with the little image of a bookworm reading a book. Those are branding elements that can be made consistent across all the titles of tales that you publish within the same general genre. So much better book, sells much better, and now I have paper copies that I can sell. I continue writing the other books in the series, working toward the ends of that as well as other tales. And along the way, I met a terrific young person who made me a very interesting proposition. She wanted to get into marketing. And now you see how you can barter your collateral with each other without spending any money. She wants to get into marketing, and she offered to review my tales and then send me a marketing plan for this series in return for my honest feedback, and if I would show it to my publisher and get her honest feedback. I was delighted. So I said yes. She came back with a remarkable idea, this lady. She said, the tales are well written, all that, but number one, these are shorter stories, they're novellas. And number two, they have a kind of game feel to them, G-A-M-E. They feel like there's a game, like a role-playing game going on. Which is absolutely true of these stories, like a D&D adventure. That is absolutely the case. And I was thrilled to get that evaluation, but I never thought about it. I never thought about her conclusions. She thought that I should push my books not toward traditional bookstores, but to the gaming and hobby stores. And it might even be cool to redesign the covers and to make them look like those collectible card games like Magic the Gathering and so forth. I love that idea. My publisher went absolutely ape for the idea, and she never had any clue what a collectible card game was. She literally said, that's a fantastic idea, let's do it. What's a collectible card game? So I had to tutor her up and show her kind of, again, the elements that are on a lot of these collectible cards. And she took that off, hired another artist, and then came back with this. Now, tell the truth, right? Isn't that just a fantastic cover? And can you see, it's got a lot of action. The artwork is, of course, fantastic, really ramped up. But can you see the elements that are still there, right? The hope symbol, the Independent Bookworm symbol, Shards of Light 1, those are all still there, right? But it really pops now. It really comes out and shows how much better the story will appeal. And now that I've got all 4 stories in the series done, take a look at this. Right? The similarity across all 4 titles. You can see the same elements, the same design, beautiful new artwork each time. This is a series that focuses on the adventures of 3 different heroes in the first 3 books. They each get their own book. Justin in the first, Feldspar in the second, Wostara in the third, and then in the conclusion, which is a longer book, they all come together and hopefully beat back the bad stuff that's happening. But you can see there the series. That is so clearly a series, right? It is so clearly meant to be of a piece. And I think really, really appealing work. At around the same time that I wrote The Ring and the Flag, I also wrote a book called The Plane of Dreams, a larger novel in a slightly different place with different characters. And again, I went to my friend for artwork at first, and I came up with this nice image here, which was kind of a melding of different styles. The Plane of Dreams is an actual place that people need to get to and stop the big bad guy. Once again, my publisher, when she signed me to the contract, said, all right, let's work on this. And she came up with a second iteration, right? It's still the same basic cover art, the same artwork, but she extended it, of course, to wrap around the cover so she could have it on a paperback book. And she brought in some of the branding elements that she has devised for me, that hope symbol, the title, Chronicler of the Lance of Hope. It's the same font that was being used in the early Ring and the Flag covers, right? So again, there's this consistency, and people could get the feel that this is a Will Hahn book. Now, I went on to write more stories, including the sequel to The Plane of Dreams, which is called The Test of Fire. She gave that a brand new cover, which looks quite different from The Plane of Dreams, but still has some of the branding elements, a little bit of difference in the corners. We got those fleur-de-lis decorations in the corners. And it's now A Tale of the Tributarians. And I thought, well, now it looks kind of different from the Plane of Dreams. But of course, my publisher, who is just crazy for revising covers, she has no hesitation. She said, well, that's no problem. I'm going to revise that one too. And here we have The Plane of Dreams in its third cover iteration, 3 times for the same book. And here I think you can see first an even more attractive image, still a big mountain in the distance on an alien landscape, but a much more personal image with the person facing away with a staff, clear signal of an epic fantasy or heroic fantasy story. Here's the older cover for comparison, right? I think you have to admit the third version there in the middle, The Plane of Dreams, pops. It's more attractive, and obviously it's related to The Test of Fire. You can see that they're clearly in the same series. These are things that you can do over time to continually improve your work, to make it come together better. I've been very lucky to exchange beta reading and editing for services like these, to sign a contract that's really very low investment on both sides for both of us. The artist who draws these covers and the ones for The Ring and the Flag was found on a worldwide website for artists to do work like that. And he's from Indonesia, and his work is extremely inexpensive from our standpoint here in America, but it's a really good salary for him. So everybody wins, and that can happen. You can coordinate that yourself or with help. If your first effort isn't what you hope for, fear not, right? You can upgrade. You can do better. You can come back and try for a new one. And when you revise the cover, just like when you revise your text, it's an excuse to sort of relaunch the book, to announce it again, to get everybody excited about it again, maybe offer a coupon and get people to come in and take a look. So just to review, you've been very patient listening to me talk and talk and talk. What you're hoping for with the cover of your book, whether you do it or whether you hire somebody to do it, is to send a signal and to be honest about what genre that is. When you send that signal, to embrace that genre, just start from there and use it as a springboard. Don't mince around. Don't try to tell the whole story on the cover. Tell that first 1,000 words. And to look professional, which could mean spending what you must. It could mean that you spend money. It could be that you spend time and effort. And I don't know which might scare you more, but make sure that you don't end up as the weekly winner on lousybookcovers.com. Start from that and see how much better you can get. What I said about collateral, I just want to put one more thing in front of you here. What I said about collateral, the basic artwork, you see here the cover of the basic artwork of the Shards of Light finale there on the left, and then the Test of Fire, its actual cover over here. I used an app called Pixaloop, which works on your phone, and then you can export to to Facebook or to your computer or to wherever, you can animate the cover in a simple way. It was really pretty easy for me to do. Here, I'm hoping that this animates for you. I'm going to try to animate the shards of light cover for you. See that? The fire and the smoke, the city on fire. You can do that kind of animation without too much trouble. On an app like Pixaloop, didn't cost me a thing. I just spent some time. And here's the test of fire, which again, we see the fire and the sparkle of the stars, right? It really adds a lot of pop, and you can put that into a Facebook post, or you can embed it on your website. You can bring it to people, you know, you can even make longer videos and put them up on YouTube. They can be part of a book trailer for your book. It really never ends, the ways to reuse this collateral. If it's terrible, then it's just a millstone around your neck. But if it's good, then it comes back and pays dividends time and time again throughout your writing career. And when you learn more, you can redo and revise and update them and make them even better. The first 1,000 words of your tale come before the ones you write. You've been focused on the writing. If you're an aspiring author and you're working on a manuscript now, you've got maybe 1 or 2 tales done, and you're at some point in thinking about or moving into the publication process. You've been focused on the words, and that was proper. There's other chores to think about now, and you don't have to be helpless. But know that people are going to make a decision whether to buy your book or not, except for your mom and your aunt. You know, they're going to buy it because they love you. But other people who don't know you are going to make a decision about whether to buy your book based on what they see on the front. That picture, all the things in that picture, the art, your name, the title, branding elements, that's going to convince them. That's going to tell them a story, 1,000 words of your story before they even open it up. It needs to be good. It needs to send that signal and look professional. I am, once again, Will Hahn. I have my own website, as you can see right there. If you sign up for reminders on my website, you'll get notified whenever I have a new blog post. And then you can also access 2 tales of the Lands of Hope, 2 short tales for free. I blog on these subjects on a fairly regular basis, and there's an archive of these different subjects available on the site. If you're seeing this on streaming record on my site or at the library, and you have a question, just send an email to will@williamlhahn.com and put in the subject line, "buy the cover," please, so I'll know that it's not just somebody trying to sell me another vacuum cleaner. We actually do need a vacuum cleaner, but at 6 months from now, I won't, I hope. So put "buy the cover" in the subject and send it to will@williamlhahn.com, and I will be happy to get back to you. Remember, the tale tells the 1,000 words before they start reading the ones you wrote. Good luck with your covers and good luck with your writing career. Thanks very much for your attention. And with that, I'll hand it back to Dorcia.
Thank you, Will, for a wonderful in-depth look at the overlooked value of catching the reader's eye. And I just want to remind everyone that you will be doing more library programs for us on July 17th at 1 p.m. and on August 14th at 1 p.m. also.
Right.
And thank you, listeners and viewers, for coming to our program today. And so much thanks to Will.
Okay. Thanks very much. Good luck, everybody.
It was great. I had so much fun.
Bye now.
Bye.